From the land where soju is cheaper than bottled water, this is the Seoul Podcast. I'm King Sejong, reminding you to take off your shoes before entering. And here is your host, Joel McPherson.
And welcome to the Seoul Podcast. Thank you for joining us today. Today we have a very great show. We have lovely Kelly Francis with us. She's a voice actor, a model, and I would say TV personality. I would say
the same actor.
Yeah, actor. Who has been very prominent in the Seoul broadcast and entertainment scenes for a long time. Now stationed overseas, but welcome to our show.
Thank you. I'm actually still participating where possible with Seoul clients with voice, obviously.
I forgot to mention activist. You're an activist too.
Yes, advocate, activist for the ethical treatment of entertainers. Yes, I am.
Great. So our topic today, well, first, I should ask everyone if you want to subscribe, please subscribe to the show. If you're watching us on YouTube, just hit that subscribe button. You can also get our podcast on Apple, on Stitcher, on Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, even Google Podcasts. We're all over. So please subscribe. And we also have a Patreon, patreon.com/Seoul Podcast, where if you just give a little bit like $5 a month, we have lots of extras for you. And you help support the show. And we thank you for joining us. And, okay, so tell us a little bit about your background, Kelly.
Well,
the short version.
The short version, yeah. I'm kind of the old lady in the entertainment scene here, which in entertainment doesn't have to be old. But I actually first arrived in Korea in the year 2000. You can believe that.
Wow.
I believed I would be at the time that I would be doing fashion modeling in Japan. That didn't work out very well. This is very, very Cliff Notes. I was very young. In a nutshell, I had a roommate working in Korea, and she got me a sort of legit, but not really, job teaching in Daegu. And I ended up finding myself there with no real housing, but kind of a job teaching. And it was
This sounds like the early 2000s.
Yeah. With not a whole lot of resources, things have changed incredibly impressed about what's happened. And I ended up having a pretty interesting adventure.
Mm-hmm.
Not an overly positive one, but when you're super young, you don't necessarily appreciate how dangerous or incorrect things are. You know, for me, it was like, oh God, I feel like I'm in a movie. So I lasted, I think, 10 months or so before my school went bankrupt. And there was some James Bond-like stuff, getting my passport away from whoever locked it out of fear for me escaping.
Oh my God.
Did the midnight run. Yeah, because back then that's how it was.
You got the baptismal situation.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, your passport taken away, midnight runs. Oh,
that's right. Absolutely. So I ended up back in Canada, went back to school. Although the next time I went back to Asia, it was well planned. I went to Seoul and I fell in love with Seoul. And then I ended up going into media and left teaching, except for on TV when it came up, and fell in love with acting, which was the last thing I saw myself doing.
Really. Oh, really? A model is surprised to become an actor.
I really don't think I was a very good model, but I love voice acting, and I definitely look forward to doing more acting.
Okay.
I loved being on TV, loved all of the opportunities I got. Yeah.
It's fun. And yes, I am ribbing you, but we've known each other for a while. We This is the way we talk with each other, is we do kind of, we rib each other a good bit. Or actually I rib you. You're always nice to me. And it's
I mean, it's difficult not to be nice to you, Joe.
Thank you.
You're just sweet as pie.
Mm-hmm.
No, I actually, one thing that I love about Korea is it gave me incredible opportunities, and that actually made all the difference. The things that I got to try in Korea made all the difference. Things that I don't think I ever would have been able to try had I stayed here. So that was one advantage. I know we'll be talking about the differences later on, but
I
yeah.
do
So
think
I ended up,
there's some opportunities here. Yeah.
yeah, it actually just started with me doing tutorials as a teacher, reading out like TOEIC and being paid $20 or 20,000 won, and thinking that was awesome, and not realizing that it was a profession. The voice acting was an actual job. I didn't know that. Had no idea that there was. That's in an interview somewhere. I think Emma, wonderful lady, help me out.
Kalka?
Emma Kalka, one of my favorite reporters. She wrote.
I love her.
I love her to death.
She's on KBS now. Yeah.
I know. I'm so proud of her. And I offered to voice her book. She just published her first book. But she did this profile on women in entertainment. And I was honored to be one of them. And I remember quoting me saying that I didn't even know there was a voice acting profession, because I didn't. I had no idea people made money doing this. And I was actually in Thailand doing a travel piece, and I met Tracy Stark, who was the editor, and he was a voice actor. And I hadn't, this was just strange luck, fate, whatever you call it. It's like, gosh, I can do all that and make money. And, I've signed me up, and I went back to Seoul. And you can do, as an expat, you can find yourself doing all sorts of interesting things, often with getting yourself in trouble here and there, which is something, the trouble part is something I try and use my group. I tell people, learn from my mistakes. I've made so many to choose from. And I mean it. There's so many mistakes I've made. But if you have education, and, now these days it's getting more sophisticated, the way exploitation is happening, because we've made a lot of money. It's a lucrative thing having an expat population producing media, ESL media, and what have you. So yeah, I try and use my group to kind of take the crappy mistakes from my past and do something positive with them.
Now you're talking about your Facebook group, right?
Yes, we were primarily in Facebook. It's a screened group. So when you apply, there are questions. I have a look at your profile. I see how new it is. If you make sense to me, if you don't make sense to me, I might decline. Usually I'll ask a question. I look at answers. I've had a lot of people try and you'd be surprised how many people have tried to get into the group just to see what's said. But I mean, privacy is kind of an ideal that isn't possible, but I try and make it as close as can realistically be expected. No agents, no industry no one who's doing the hiring, so that when we give feedback and when we ask questions that are sensitive, we don't have to worry who's watching, who's evaluating, that kind of thing. I wanted to get rid of that and push the idea of community being the one superpower we have in a place where unions are illegal.
We've had experience with that. What is the name of the group?
Sorry about that.
I asked you right when you were drinking.
Staying properly hydrated. I go through like 8 of these. It's EE Rock, or Expat Entertainers Republic of Korea. Yeah, EE Rock for short. Maybe you could post a link to it.
I will post a link in the show notes and the comments of the YouTube.
Yeah. So I'm looking for people that are in Seoul. If you're researching going to Seoul, I ask you to put that in the application so that I understand, because I want it to be focused. I try and catalog, like if you're a parent, you have kids, we have a lot of parents, the dancers, the models. It wasn't very organized, because when I made this, I actually made it specifically for women, and never in a million years expected it to kind of grow, but the need was there. In fact, a lot of people felt that it was, it's a nice way of putting this. Well, there isn't one. People called me a traitor. Some people called me a traitor for creating what they felt was helping foster competition and in jobs that they didn't want. They didn't, they didn't like the idea of bringing people in, to an industry where they were happy, with a, concentrated little group getting the
Yeah.
same jobs. So that's one way of looking at it. I had a different view, but ultimately, I think that in this situation, community is the one power that we have. And when it's a group and not a human, just a person, it becomes a force because you're not blacklisting a person. You're up against a group of a lot of people, and we try and do the win-win thing. I'm big with cooperation. We support responsible casting personnel or anyone looking for actors. So we're helpful. If someone needs a part, I will personally help them cast that part. I will help them communicate grievances. I'll help them be understood. We want to be helpful. We want that win-win because we recognize that this is a really unregulated system. It's difficult for agents. It's difficult for everyone. We're in it together. We all have similar goals. We don't always feel that we can afford to empathize with the other side, but by doing that, we then have leverage. So if someone has a problem, there's a reputation fear, although it's not abused. We're not about that, but we're in a good position to go and say, this is what is going on. This is the concern. We'd like to keep helping you. Can you address this? And we've had a lot of success with that and with keeping people safe. And with filling roles, with doing it fast, because it's only performers, only people in Seoul, only people that, again, make sense. And I'm slowly starting to kind of catalog everybody.
Nonetheless, it does sound like your early experience in Daegu prepared you for the current environment and the voice acting industry.
I don't know what it prepared me for.
Well, it sounds like where the voice acting industry is now is where the Hagwon or the education industry was 20 years ago.
No, actually, I think that things have gotten much more sophisticated. What I'm seeing now is a lot more sophistication and the way that exploitation can happen. A lot more intelligence put into it, more complexity. It's basically greed, and it's gotten out of hand. And when there's been cycles. I didn't see some of the trends going on right now. I didn't see coming. I usually feel that these end poorly. I'm expectant of that for some of what's going on right now. But things have changed in about 2 years. Just the last couple of years, some trends have popped up that have been particularly nerve-wracking for me. But in terms of just voice acting, I think that it's important to remember that there is no voice acting visa in Korea. And I don't think it makes sense to the Korean government to make one. They're at least in the top 5, if not the top 3 English language content providers in the world. When you think about all the ESL, phonics, TOEIC, every Hagwon needing materials. I mean, it's factory level. It's a lot of money being made, but imagine having to issue a visa for every single voice creating that content. And back in the golden days, as we call it, I used to be in a studio 8-10 hours a day, every single day, just churning out ESL content, literally. And that's a crazy amount of work. It's not like that anymore, in case anybody's getting excited. But that was definitely a time where there were more jobs than there were actors. It's certainly not that way, and it did change. And it was a blessing in terms of getting experience behind the mic. But imagine having to issue a visa and regulate all of those people. So it makes sense to me that having large agencies handle that was very comfortable for them. And when you think about it, entertainers aren't really politically relevant in a lot of ways. Like at a Hagwon, teachers interact with kids and moms, and they're definitely important in terms of families, whereas actors, especially voice actors, are not. So I don't feel that. I feel that there's no box to check for voice acting for a reason. And I've never heard of a voice actor being deported personally. I don't imagine that it's a big concern. So it's not. the only voice actors that are legal, and they do get better jobs, tend to be in TV, broadcasting, or they're married, or they've taken it upon themselves because they're serious about their profession and they want to live long term. But you can absolutely have a long voice acting career and be illegal in Seoul. And there's an argument, in a way, there is an argument as to why that can work. I'm not going to say it's ideal, but an argument can be made for it.
Uh-huh. So what is the typical visa? If you're not on an F series visa, which if you're on an F visa, you can get any type of job you want. But if you're not on an F series visa, which is what most people are in Korea, most expats in Korea are not on F series visas. What type of visa would you normally get?
Well,
if you wanted to be legal.
Usually it's an E6, which is the artist visa. And those are, like I said, there's no box. There's a box for broadcasting, for singing. There's no voice acting unless it's changed recently. And E6 visas, they don't announce public changes. So they're difficult to stay on top of. But as far as I know, there never has been a box for it, but an E6 visa would make it legal. A student visa after 6 months allows for, I think it's up to 20 hours of work.
Yeah, you get a limited amount of work after.
Right, but nobody would complain. I mean, that's sometimes acceptable, sometimes not, depending on how long. Like if you're on an animation series and they were worried about if you'd be here in a year, that might be a problem for some people. But that would be about it. Or an investor's visa, but it used to be attainable. It used to be 30 million won to get a D. What is it? D?
I forget. It's a D visa. Now, way back in the day, before I got my F visa, I was doing shows for EBS. Now, this was not voice acting; it was TV acting. And they gave me an E7 visa, which is lecturers, like a college lecturer's visa.
Yeah, that doesn't fly legally in entertainment.
That was 2007, though. That was a long, long time ago.
Still shouldn't fly.
Yeah, and they didn't know what to do either. Yeah.
Well, that makes sense. I mean, everything's changed. It changed dramatically, I want to say about 5 years ago, where you needed an invitation from the ministry, a specific invitation, and it's changing more. It's recently become 6 months, and then it will change again with what's happening. But E6 visas are kind of highly coveted from what I can tell, and yet people don't realize there are massive problems and dangers and pressures with having them. Otherwise, you come over here and you voice act with an agent who cleans the money for you and no one knows the difference. And maybe they deduct taxes, maybe they don't, and you go about your business. And that describes how most voice actors start.
Well, that brings up two questions. First, say someone's teaching English here or is thinking of coming to Korea, how would they get their foot in the door? And also, what are the things they should watch out for? What are the typical ways people are being exploited, cheated, or just what are the dangers?
Well, right now, the one that's concerning me the most is the fact that, like with anything that's highly coveted and not easy to obtain, it's become a business model selling E6 visas, or visa milling is the proper term. You can buy an E6 visa. There's often this perception that whoever sells it to you will get you work, take care of you. It used to be that an E6 visa was difficult to obtain for good reason, because once you have it, you can't do anything but artistic work. And artistic work is often infrequent. It used to be given to people that had, specific shows and guaranteed work. And that was, in a way, that made sense. I mean, that way you had a good idea that you'd be able to pay your rent and eat. When I got mine, it was a combination of both when I first got mine. But now people are going in and they're buying these visas. They're new to Korea. They're desperate to follow a dream, or, everybody's different, and they're finding that they can't compete. They don't have the contacts. They're dependent. I mean, I had reached a point, and I tell actors this all the time, you have to evolve to be your own walking CEO, your own contacts. You have to be at the point where you don't need an agent for anything, that you can book your own gigs, you can advertise. Basically, you're doing everything yourself. I had actually hired several managers. I would train, audition them, train them, work with them for a lot of reasons. That was a bit atypical, but for me at the time, it made sense. And you just need to be independent to that degree, because agents don't, in general, I mean, there's some people that this is different for. Most will not do that. And so now I'm getting people coming to the group saying, well, I've got an A6 visa, but I have to go work. I'm working in an illegal hagwon because I can't eat. I can't pay my bills. And what I then foresee is when they get caught teaching illegally, which is a lot more likely than being than getting caught acting illegally, you're then worth $5 million to immigration, but your boss is worth $80 million. I mean, it's then becomes a different ball game, a different situation. So I'm seeing a lot of people that, for lack of a delicate way to put it, they never would have, in my mind, they weren't marketable in the first place in Korea, but they were able to pay thousands of dollars for a visa. They ended up here, some of them with guarantees of 2 to 7 years. I'm now finding 7 years, which you can't guarantee that immigration will grant a visa for 7, like from year to year, let alone 7. So these people are told that they have to sign up for X years in advance, sworn to secrecy, which is illegal. You can't demand confidentiality about illegal activity, but that's going on. No, really, and these actors believe it at the time. They're terribly intimidated, and there's a lot of abuse for those that don't comply. I mean, I'm seeing a lot of horrible things happening to control people, because when someone signs your visa, they own your life. They control when you're paid. They control sometimes where you live. There's this fear of being blacklisted that's ever present. I mean, that's your life is in their hand. You're dependent on this person. Right. So there's a reason that it should be difficult to get. The government doesn't give them out, and hasn't for as long as I've been working. I had 2 very popular shows on EBS, and my boss was late renewing mine. And I remember saying to EBS, "Can you just?" They're like, "No, we don't do that." I'm like, I can see why, but they don't. They then go to these other agencies to take care of it for them. And it really is a situation where it works out well for some people, and other people, they end up breaking the law in order to survive. And that scares the hell out of me for these people. Some of these people that I just can't imagine them fitting in, and yet they're here locked in for X number of years, and they've paid dearly for it. So
you
that's
don't pay for these things.
Now.
That's the thing. It's like two things. You don't pay for a visa. You don't pay for an agent.
Well, there's a loophole. And I remember when I first, shortly before I left Korea, I was hired as a consultant for a couple of places. This was a topic of discussion. I nearly became management at one group that I highly respect. There's a loophole that allows an administration fee. That admin fee doesn't have a number to it, but it's definitely not intended to be 5 million won. It's meant. So often what people will say is, well, this is the lawyer's fee. I mean, nobody's ego wants to believe, I'm paying to do a job. But when you start to see that your boss isn't interested in how much you work, really, or they barely know about you and they're not promoting you, and yet their whole business model, because they're charging so much money, is really centered around how much money they get when you sign a visa, and the numbers add up. Like, that's a massive red flag.
We're in this because we've dabbled a bit in child modeling for Jian, because she's interested in this stuff and our research. And there's some shady agencies that want parents to pay In fact, our relatives, they were paying an agency for their daughter, and what they do is they really talk it up and say, oh yeah, your child's going to be a star, but they're a little rough around the edges. They need to go to our school. They need to take classes with us, and that's where they get you. And they have these expensive classes. You need to agree to 2 years up front and pay for these. A
But
2-year
Jan doesn't
contract.
need that.
GN's not doing. No. We actually, there's
Right.
one agency we were seriously talking about it, but every fiber in my body was like saying something's wrong with this. We should
Right.
not do this. The only reason we would do it is for if Gian enjoyed it, and that's the only reason we ever thought of doing this was for it's a good outlet for her.
Well,
Only
I,
reason.
I think that like if you just simplify it and look at the definitions of why these visas are given out, they're given out to professionals that have skills that make it so that they're necessary, they're indispensable. They're
Right.
not meant for people to come here and learn. I mean, I've had agents who've asked for me, can I speak to you about this? And, with good intentions and not a whole lot of education. And they've ended up nearly in tears because they felt so certain, they've made a business plan and they said, well, we're going to help them, figure out Korea and help them learn the ropes. And this is intended for professionals that already have expertise. It's the other way around. It's not meant to be a training, teaching type visa. It never was. This is not the nature of the visa. So it's almost like in their minds, they're justifying it by reinventing the purpose of the visa in the first place and making it so that, well, we provide nurturing and we provide extra training. And this is what I see a lot with the visa milling. We're going to involve training and teaching and language. That was never the intention of the visa. You're meant to perform something a Korean can't in some capacities, and you're meant to be an expert. You're meant to be providing something that is significant and outstanding in a way. So there was a reason why it was hard to get, and now it's kind of the opposite. And I'm seeing the fallout, whereas a lot of people, I don't know precisely. I saw a breakdown of human trafficking, and one of the elements, and I'm not by any means calling this human trafficking, but there is an overlap in the sense that when people are forced to break the law to survive, that's one of the elements involved in human trafficking. And that is, they're locked into this place. They're controlled by a sponsor. The sponsor is not, they're able to use the intricacies of the law to deem them mentally unstable. For example, the E6 is a rare visa, and that due to the belief that entertainers are often prone to depression or suicidal tendencies, you can actually be, there's a lot of ways the employer can kind of wash their hands of it. There's channels they have to go through, but there are very few protections for the talent. And it scares me when I consider how frequently someone comes to me in this situation now. But the most common one I'm seeing now is I want out. My documents have been, I've been harassed, threatened, blackmailed. My documents have been plastered on the web. They're scaring the shit out of me. I don't know what's true and what's not. But they have their money and they're being forced to recruit. Sometimes they're actually being pushed to participate in things like supporting politicians. Basically they're a foreigner on demand. They're considered an asset when it's convenient. And then when it comes to commission, when an employer doesn't really care about your skill set and doesn't have an interest, if they're not making money when you make money, that's a bad thing. Like, you should be making, when you're looking for someone who's signing, look for someone who actually makes money when you make money and cares about how much money you're making and cares about what you can bring to them. Because if they're not, then there's only two other ways they can make money. And that's if you're paying them for a visa or, I won't get into some of the more complicated business models people have here that are legit but strange. But that's a massive red flag. They should be making money They should care that you're making money. They should be taking a commission. But then when you suddenly get a job or something lucrative happens and they jump in and decide that we're your managers and we deserve 70% of that out of the blue, like that's another thing that I'm seeing a lot of too. And people wanting to get away is now the current. A lot of people are coming to me just saying, I want away from these people. They run my life, and visa sponsors do. I often tell people be very cautious about wanting an E6. A C4 is a better arrangement, but that tends to just be for fashion models. It's unusual for anybody else.
Okay, so now that you've scared me. Say I'm an ESL teacher, and you've scared me, but I still want to do it.
Well, you don't have to be. Honestly, I don't like to give advice that implies illegality, but the norm.
But you still want to go into the business. How would you start? What should you prepare? Should you do a voice reel? Where would you find work?
Well, voice reels actually are less used than samples in Korea, but most often, first of all, if you have a home studio, there's a lot you can do that is just globally international and not dependent on this country or that. And that's where voice acting is moving. If we contrast the two countries, we can talk about that. But if you wanted to do this, I would say start to learn about voice acting, practice it, learn about the cultural differences between Korea and the rest of the world because they're huge. Learn about the industry. You may or may not like it. And then go to agents and audition for them. They will make samples for you. They will be pretty upfront if they'll work with you or not. Some agents won't care if you have a visa. Some will. Often, this is still, I would say half and half. More often than not, the agents won't care if you're good because they're realists too, especially when the virus hit. It wasn't something that people could afford to do, but you should definitely learn your craft, learn as much as possible, and go attend an audition session at a reputable agency. And what they make is samples. They'll save them. They usually have you read like something that's like, we call it a narration, like a typical Samsung ad. Storytelling is another big demand. We call it gyoje is educational material. And in Korea, everything is very precise. Pronunciation is very precise because you're dealing with non-native English speakers. It's not like in America where individuality and nuances are kind of championed.
Yeah.
And then if you sing, that's fantastic. Character voices, boy, girl, that's all important for educational stuff and storytelling. There's video games is the one area that I think Korea really has awesome potential in. And that's usually the same people used over and over again, but some pretty incredible game companies. But it all begins by getting involved in one way or another. And those that have talent and work hard tend to, work harder. People are receptive to talent. Usually it starts with going to an agent and simply seeing what they say, getting feedback. They'll make samples for you, being upfront with them about your situation, and then making a choice. Am I going to pursue the point system? Am I going to look for another way? But that's the best thing to do. It's not scary. And I have known voice actors that have had long, gratifying careers and never had a legal visa. It's just reality. And I've known the opposite.
And how would one go about finding these agents? Are they on Craigslist or something?
No, I would steer people away from Craigslist when it comes to most things.
Nonetheless, that's how I found my only agent was on Craigslist.
Yeah, most agents don't. There are always exceptions because clients often don't know where to start. Groups like there's a group on Korea that's mostly voice actors, but groups like mine are helpful with that. We try and have some stake in who we're dealing with and checking out their background. But There's maybe three to five large groups, but Elgate in Korea is a very large machine, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
26 is another large agency that a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people go to. Just to throw out two big names that
Yeah.
most people in Seoul would know. 26 is owned by a friend of mine. He's a wonderful guy named Matt Rutledge. He's a Canadian, very responsible business person. He's very good for encouraging people and giving them feedback. Elgate is very old school. They've been around forever. But these are people that at the very least, they can give honest feedback and say, we think you have potential for this market or we don't. And then beyond that, it really depends. I mean, if you're a singer, that's a completely different market. That's the nice thing about creative endeavors. You know, there's a lot of different things people can do. I had one guy who was brilliant in video games. He wasn't great. He couldn't do educational stuff, but he was a master in terms of sounding like a monster.
That's cool. Because I remember I was talking to
soft and like just unbelievably brilliant with that stuff, but too spooky for educational stuff.
And that's funny because I was talking to one of our mutual friends who does one of the video game guys, and he had we were having a few drinks and he was talking about, oh yeah, just that's what I was doing today. And it's like, well, what do you do? And he's like, most of my days is doing this.
Yeah, the fighting. And those, I used to leave those booths sweating after. I love doing video games, but impact noises or dying. Although the thing with Korea is they tend to always want the same thing.
Well, that's the other thing too, is I've been told not only with the English, but on the Korean language side, there's only maybe 6 categories of voices. There's like a specific child voice that you're only allowed to do, a specific adult male voice, like a father voice. That's why whenever I'm watching cartoons in Korea, it's like everyone sounds the same. There's always the same adult voice. Always, it sounds like this.
Korea's
every
really
town, every child's voice,
Yeah, well, I mean that's helpful, but at the same time, that's one of the reasons why I felt like I hit a point where it was difficult to grow in Korea because you get very good at the same things, and then when you come to America, it's like learning how to do your job all over again.
So you're doing stuff in America. You're actively narrating audiobooks. You can find them on audible.com. Yeah. And I've heard your work and you sound different than you do right now.
Well, yeah. Just to finish what I was saying, in Korea, one of the things that they do is they have an exam for every network. If you're a KBS actor or an embassy actor, there's a very difficult exam they take where they test actors on these techniques. So everybody is tested on their ability to perfect what you're referring to. So that's one of the reasons why, yes, there's uniformity, and I mean, it's really rigid, but you're right. I'm in America now. I had to kind of throw a lot of the Korean work out the window, and it's very, very different. I won't say there's no crossover because being behind the mic that much is always going to be helpful for learning technique, how to breathe. My technique just talking is often terrible. It's like I get in the booth and I get in a different mindset and, grab my diaphragm and tell myself, all right, now you're going to breathe properly, and you can, other than being lazy and putting all of the emphasis on my poor vocal cords. And I have had nodules in the past and gone through the growing pains, and you can really hurt yourself, by the way. New actors in the box for 8 hours a day, like TMJ was something a lot of people have. And
but the jaw thing.
Yeah, I mean, any repetitive movement, of course.
Yeah.
It's not here. So I definitely over about 15 years of doing this full time have gone through a lot of different ailments and getting better. And then it wasn't when I sought out coaching, a lady in Manhattan actually who's been coaching for 50 years, if you can believe that. 50 freaking years. She's brilliant. Her name is Peggy Lewis. She ran Pierce Studio and BizKids, and she was the first studio in New York who opened up to special needs kids, autistic kids, said, we'll take everybody. She went to Canada's most prestigious performance art school. She does opera, clown. She's incredible. It's just incredible. One of my colleagues, the gentleman who referred me to her, named Garin, he went to Indiana U, which is an incredible musician school, Juilliard. And I remember him saying, of all the teachers I've had, Peggy has blown them all away, and not a moment I've spent with her has been wasted. She's not cheap, but for acting teachers, pretty good. But she changed my life. She helped taught me how to breathe, to sing, helped me learn how to do things without hurting myself. And that was when I kind of started to take, like, things became serious, and I decided I wanted to make a career out of this. But when I got to America, the technical practice and the sort of go on autopilot and because you're expected to be perfect. They don't want any mistakes in Korea. That all then has a benefit for things like long narrations. But when you're just doing commercial copy, like I'm with a SAG-AFTRA franchise agency here and just in Colorado. And when I get an 8, they're looking for the opposite. Their most popular request sounds like an everyday relatable voice. Like, they don't want to hear someone that sounds like a voice actor at all. And so sometimes it's taken me, gosh, this is embarrassing, like 8 hours to not sound like a voice actor.
Trying to not sound like the usual Korean narration.
To sound like a regular person has taken me like 8 tries. And I've got a wonderful agent that really will spend that time with me, and I'll get there. But coming from the land of like perfectly crisp, everything over, very.
Wow. Okay. Because the jobs I've had, it's like I sit there and sometimes I'm the one that says, can we do that again? Because too many times I do a line and then they go down means next. Just like, really? That was okay? Usually
they know what they're looking for.
Yeah, like, I guess so. But sometimes I go like, hold on. I said that wrong. Let me try that again.
Well, the internet has changed. Sorry, I'm so passionate about this topic. I'm going to be like talking over you because this is just
talk over me.
No, I mean, this is,
I'm just a pretty face on this show.
Obviously. Pretty face everywhere. When you get to do something, I can already tell that I'm going to look at this and be like, Kelly, why don't you just shut up once in a while? But when you get to talk about something that you're so passionate about that you can't stop expressing yourself about it, I feel that way about this.
So you're misogynist against yourself.
Misogynist against
yourself? Yeah. He's like,
explain that, or do you want me to
talking? I'm talking too much. I am a woman who's talking too much. Is that what you're saying?
I didn't say anything about being a woman, but thank you for introducing that misogyny. Do you want to walk that back, or should I continue?
I'm going to keep it in the show because I like all my warts to be showing.
No, I didn't mention anything. I meant me as a human, no mention of gender here. I noticed you went red as a beet. Is there a reason?
I do that very quickly.
Because I could really easily. I could just continue and try and batter the shit out of you. Anyway, no, I'm just saying that this is a topic where I just totally need to be told to shut up. And yet I'm a shy person. But in that one interview I mentioned with Emma, she'd asked me what I loved most. And I'd said, because as Kelly, I'm not funny and I don't I don't consider myself someone that can make people laugh, but my characters, I've heard kids laugh. I've done, I'm able to be funny. I did a puppet show once. I'm able to do those things through bringing characters to life that I can't accomplish as boring old me. So, I mean, that's one of the gifts of being able to be a performer. And I love the power of audio. I'm in love with it. So I love talking about it. And yes, you may well have to say, Kelly, shut up. And I will comply. I totally will. But America, you get here and they don't even know what they're looking for. They just know that they'll know it when they hear it. And half the time I spend trying to sound like an everyday person that is unique And it's difficult, like a different take. And yeah, it's funny, they'll give you a ton of adjectives that they want, but then they'll say, no saccharine, sweet, announcerist, polished quality whatsoever.
Wow.
This has to be totally authentic. Sometimes, and I used to do this before, I'll put a picture of someone in my studio, and I'll imagine myself like talking to that person. I did this in Korea too. That authenticity, because you're talking to someone. You never want to sound like you're just speaking out to the masses. This has to be, you're a storyteller, but you're also giving a message, and people want that connection, and we're responsible for making them. People forget that connection is there and it's important. Even in a video game, they used to say, Kelly, we need it to sound realer than real. The expectations now for video games are realer than real. I don't know if you know the Silicon Knights or Dennis Dyack. He's the CEO of the Silicon Knights. I think they've changed company names because of some.
Is that a sports team?
No, that's a huge video game company based out of Canada. But I was his waitress a million zillion years ago that we will not name because that would be a mean thing to do to me. But I remember being his waitress and then reconnecting him right as Gamergate was going on, and him saying back then, before video games became as graphic as they did, I said, I was into Super Mario. That was about as complicated as I got. And I said, what do people want? And he's like, well, we have to make them realer than real, because what people want now is for things to be like more compelling than reality. We're competing with reality. We're competing with your home life. We're competing with, whatever you do. We want to be more exciting than that. So the audio, and I went on to do a project with, I think it was NC Soft.
NC Soft, okay.
Right. It was a project to help someone. It was either a job promotion or a festival, and we redid one of Blizzard's trailers for Diablo, and it was so freaking cool just to work.
Oh, that would be so cool.
It was, and I didn't do it was a long time ago, didn't do a great job, but they did the sound design, and I remember thinking, well, one, I thought like, God, I'm not worthy. And two, I remember thinking it amazed me how, like they do their own Foley. Like it was
Foley's the sound effects that you see.
Yes, exactly. Like they have a factory where, if you step on a twig and there's that noise, they'll go in and make those, they're
celery. They're breaking a bone with celery.
They're not using software for any of that stuff. Like this is art. And he did the most incredible job with that. I was just the voice actor that got lucky and got to participate, but thinking, God, he made me, even though I didn't do a great job, he made me sound fantastic. And he, in my opinion, his version blew Blizzard's out of the water. Just by audio.
Blizzard is the studio to emulate.
Well, NC Soft kicked the shit out of them on this occasion. So, I stand by that. It was pretty impressive. And then I did a lot of horror. I started to do trailers for video games, which is unusual for women. And I'll never forget having an aha moment. And this is a good thing to remember for voice actors, where a guy named Oro, he's a Cuban. He was like one of two Cubans in Korea at the time. Brilliant director.
Yeah, we don't have many Cubans.
Well, Oro is someone who I just knew from the moment I met him that he was going to just shine. He was a director, artist, actor, dancer. I remember they did the making of, they'll often do the making of a video game, and I used my phone and filmed myself doing this horror game, and he was watching me and I was kind of proud of it. And he said, oh no, this is no good. He just looked very disappointed. And I said, what? And he said, you're not acting. Look at you. You're stopping and you're starting. You haven't become the character. And I said, well, I have a lot of technical stuff to pay attention to. And he said, yeah, that's for your training, but you're not scared. You're not the character. You're pretending. Show me acting. Yeah. And from that moment on, that changed me. That's was like, those are magical words. And I loved that. And it changed my job. It really did. So that's something to remember when you're telling a story, and we are this, our job is to inspire dialogue. That's what acting does. That's the function of theater and of art, to inspire dialogue. We're storytellers, but we're not just pretending and reiterating. I mean, we're reliving. You can kind of see why all of us are a little bit batshit crazy, because I know I certainly am. But we really are reliving when we do this, and there's magic in that. I try and remember that, because when you lose the magic in your job, you're kind of fucked.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, you're right. You're right. I'm going to ask you the most uncomfortable question in any type of interview, especially job interviews.
Okay.
Payment. What? That's such a sticky issue, prickly, sticky.
We publish
issue.
lists on this. It's not that sticky for me.
Okay, because I remember there are times.
My group is good this way. Honestly, Joe, if people come to my group, there are very few questions that we consider too sensitive to address. Payment, not too sensitive to address.
Okay, because there was controversy where I think it was one of those Craigslist jobs, and a lot of the established voice actors were going online trying to spread the word, say, don't take this job. You're lowering the rates for everyone if you take this job. So what would you say is the typical rate to expect?
You're lowering the established voice actors. I'm torn as to whether or not I should take you off topic by telling you why that makes me laugh so much. But well, basically, how I said people called me a trick. Back in the day, people didn't want anyone to know prices. And then, fast forward 10 years and they're upset that uneducated people will take jobs for next to nothing. And yet they didn't want anyone to know prices. Mm-hmm. Anyhow, yes, educating about prices is really important. One of the biggest advantages, I would say, living in Seoul, and this is just a hard reality. If you live in America, you're lucky enough to get signed with an agent, which is not as easy, a reputable agent as you think. They have reasonably, sizable rosters, but they're not that big, and they've got a lot of the same voices. You're going to get a lot of auditions. You're damn lucky if you get a job. If you do, it'll pay, yes, significantly more than a Seoul job, but the likelihood of you getting that job, very slim. Whereas in Seoul, you could very well work every day regularly and be able to predict your schedule. So that's one of the main trade-offs. And lately we've had a lot of Japan members, and they've got it, I won't get into that because of limited time, but I hear a lot of griping about that. People have to realize that trade-off is it's an important trade-off to realize. It depends on your goals, but you're definitely going to make a lot more money and get a lot more experience if that's what you're looking for. If you're there long-term, that's different. There's no exact science for pay, but when we come to what's generally acceptable, it all depends on if you're working freelance or for an agency. It's common for agents to take 50%. That's just a kind of accepted norm. Some have taken 40%. They've tweaked with that number. Some are taking 80, 90%, depending on what it is. But for an educational job, which is the most typical, it would be common to, as a freelancer, to charge 100,000 won per hour. And as an agent might pay 50 or 60 or 70 to, a professional actor. That's the most typical type of job. That's the most typical pay for you right there. And of course, when you get into non-native speakers that sound close enough, or, different situations, but there you have it. 150 or 60 are kind of the magical go-to numbers for educational work, or gyoje. Yeah. And you could end up, these are volume jobs. They could be 1 hour, 2 hours. I've had 8 hours a day. I've had huge, month-long gyoje projects. So that's the most common. Yeah,
good.
No problem. And people lose sight of that. They really do. I mean, if I get one job here in voice acting, it might be a few $1,000s. But again, most of the time I'm just doing audition after audition. The Audible program, I think, is important for people to know, because you can do that just being an American or Canadian from anywhere.
The Audible audiobooks.
That's
Audible.com.
ACX. Yeah. And then things like narration and chant, which is kind of an ESL invention, but chant, singing, singing and chant, it's 150 is pretty typical. And again, cut that in half roughly as a general rule if you're dealing with an agent, and then tweak it a bit. It becomes a negotiation game, and like everything in Seoul, a relationship matter. Animation, you're either paying per episode or per hour. That's, with dubbing, how good you are comes into play, how prepared you are. That's a bit more complicated, but it's too advanced for people that are just getting into this. Yeah. Narrations, though, that was one of the first type of job I saw abused, when all of a sudden Samsung was going to agents that didn't know what they were talking about, modeling agents, and offering $100 for CFs that
commercials.
Right. And up until recently, placements and duration, like where it's played, for how long it's played, that was never even discussed up until recently, but that's a big freaking deal.
Yeah.
Multiplies and multiplies. But, it's generally, let's just assume it's in one place, one spot. It's just for like a local thing. It might be like a $300 for narration. That is probably one of the more abused, because a lot of people need narrations. Or e-learning, you might get 70,000 an hour instead of or 150, 70 with the agency. So, it gets to be something where community is really helpful, because you can ask, but if you don't ask, you don't know. And then you get people that think, well, gosh, I'm just talking. This is easy. And I'm getting, $30 for it. That's awesome. And that really, or ARSs, which is a sound chips, machines that talk, $150 is pretty standard for something like that.
Right.
Like it's like, press 1 for English, press 2 for Korean. Thank you. That kind of thing. That should be about $150 for a job. And a lot of people, how would you know? So
I saw some company, Gangnam, was offering $20,000 an hour for that. And people were grabbing it.
And then there's some that just want to give you, there's some that congregate it, and they just want to know how many you can do in an hour. They'll send you tons of narrations and pay you by the hour. Like, a lot of people have found creative ways to exploit what is a very lucrative product centered around the fact that you're an expat and you can do something that Koreans can't. And the last thing that they're worried about is visa. They're just looking at what they can get away with, and they're making a lot of money. So it's important to remember that, yes, you can definitely fuck up the market. And you definitely need a community. Like, how can you ever know? I mean, and when you're desperate, I always tell people to remember this. We've all been in a situation where we can't say no for personal reasons. And I don't like passing judgment. If I were to have a child and my child can't eat, I'm not going to weigh that against, well, I don't want to let the community down by lowering standards. I mean, we never know where another person's coming from. So I try to urge people not to not to push their ethics too hard on other people, because we just never know what that other person is facing. Yeah. Because it happens. We just have no way of knowing. But I will say that often a lot of languages are needed. Yes, visa is no concern. It becomes a giant negotiation game, and it really helps to have a guideline, a lot of dialogue, and then a group that at least can say, like in my group, I have people I work with and I help them find people. If they're mistreated, they're not going to get my help anymore. So that's one of the things that I can do for people. And we've had wonderful relationships. And, if I can do that, it's win-win. Win-win has been what's worked for me so far. I'm not into blacklisting, although I have. And when I do, it's usually because someone's broken the law, and there's documentation. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, it just generally doesn't happen.
Well, wow, that's a lot of information. So one more time, I think we'll wrap things up right now. I think you've answered most everything I think we could pack into our time. But one more time, remind everyone what's the name of the group that they can go find out they can join to find out all this information.
EROC is the acronym that I picked pretty randomly. It's got
Expat Entertainers Republic of Korea.
Well, yeah, I just say EROC. Everyone calls it that. It's kind of got like a half face of a woman with her lips. She's got a piercing here. It's got some like funky. It's a painting that I painted actually. So it's more the image that shows up. You have to answer questions and make some sense to me. There are rules. I moderate everything. I try very hard to keep a handle on who's in it. I'm trying to think if there's anything important that I want new people coming here to know. I think paying for the visas thing is really...
Also, location's a big deal. You're going to have more opportunities in Seoul than you're going to have in Daegu.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Busan's a little better, but yeah, if you want to work in media, you want to be in Seoul.
Yeah, it says like in America in voice acting, you got to be in New York, LA, or funny enough, Dallas.
Yeah, no, for sure. And well, there's a lot of game companies that are working via Skype. I mean, online is where it's at now. We call it Connect here, but with the New York, which pisses off Korea because it's taking business out of Korea, but to get around costs. But either way, you want to be in Seoul. You definitely want to be able to speak Korean or to have someone that can speak Korean on your behalf, because that just makes negotiations, which are sensitive to begin with, so much easier. And then you have a buffer between you. Like your job should be to act. That way, if there's a problem, you don't want that relationship to... That's
why the agency takes 50%.
Or a manager or, a friend or for me, it was always a manager or wife or whatever.
Spouse tends to be for a lot of the established people, it seems. If they're married to a Korean spouse.
That's the most common, but I think that we never got to ACX. If I could throw it in quickly, if you have a home studio, and that's becoming like a must. If you want to be a voice actor in America, you must have a home studio. If you can do that, you can make money narrating books using the ACX program, where there's royalty share options, royalty share plus, which means you get money to pay your engineer, or you just get paid per finished hour. That's a very good opportunity for someone who wants to learn and do a lot of narrating, but it really can be very lucrative for people, and you can be anywhere in the world. I know people making tens of thousands of dollars a month just doing that, and it's exciting. And it's you audition for books, and it's a very kind of cool challenge at a time where you can't do much else. But yeah, I would urge everybody that with a home studio to check that out.
Well, thank you so much. Well, thank you, Kelly, for showing up today and giving us a lot of useful information.
I know you're going to be embarrassed about how much I talk.
No, this is great. This is so different from our a lot of our shows, especially from the past, is just us getting drunk and talking about the news. This is actually useful stuff. Yes.
Well, how do I sign up for one of those shows?
We might do those again. We'll see.
Well, I'd like to participate.
Kelly Francis, any other way people can find you, or anything you want to promote?
Well, I'm doing a podcast now. Joe knows this because he was my first guest. I haven't launched it officially because I'm trying to get more in before I officially launch it. We're going to be talking about expats who have succeeded in creative endeavors overseas, but I'm also going to do questions, like a brief, how I noticed that Joe on Soul Podcast does like news updates, kind of things. I'm going to be taking questions and answering them and trying to be as universal as possible, not just Soul specific. So I will be doing that, plus having guests from established expats over what they've done. I always have safety in mind because I'm often working with, I've worked with the police or working with different groups to try and keep people safe and keeping that in mind and keeping what's happening with the industry in mind. But I would love, once I have that up, probably not before you publish this. I would love for people to check out my podcast when it comes out and shoot me questions. If there's a question I can answer, I'm happy to do it. I think that I don't know. I'll give you some kind of contact information for myself.
Okay. Does the podcast have a name yet?
We're very close to getting
the Kelly.
Very close. Right now, it's Kelly's new podcast that she's hoping that you check out.
That's good for SEO. There we go.
Yeah, something like that. But I've got it's narrowed down to 3. Decisions are not my friend. I like options, but not decisions.
I'm here to help you out. And people listening, I'm here to help you out too. If you have questions for us, for me at the Seoul Podcast, please join us. We're on Facebook at facebook.com/Seoul Podcast. You can follow us on Twitter at King Sejong. Yes, we have that Twitter account. You can also go to us at soulpodcast.com. And we're on YouTube. I put it on our Zen Kimchi channel if you watch us on youtube.com/Zen Kimchi. And if you really want to help us and enjoy the show, and if you want to get all of our past episodes, you can go to our Patreon at patreon.com/Seoul Podcast. Just $5 a month. You can get stuffs.
You make this sound like it's next to nothing, but $5 a month actually, I didn't realize how $5 a month impacted my life till I did my taxes.
Yeah.
I'm just being a pain in the ass with you.
You are, but I love it. It's fine.
I don't know. $5 is not a small amount of money, but you're worth it, Joe. You're definitely worth it.
Thank you.
You're worth it.
Well, you do get value from money. I try to give something back. Also, if you want to listen to, we also have another podcast, the Dark Side of Seoul podcast.
I love that. Everyone should check that out. Love it. It's like the most unique thing ever to come out of Seoul and forever. And I just love it.
Thank you. Thank you. We do that with Sean, and so you can find that at darksideofsoul.com/podcast, or on Apple, on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, most all podcast catching up. You can get that on there too. So everyone, thank you for joining us today. Thank you, Kelly, once again. It's such an honor to have you here. I feel like we've made the big time by having you on the show now.
Oh, come on.
I do.
Thank you. I'll take that, but yeah, okay. But thank you. No, I enjoyed it. I know that I'll get off and I'll think, fuck, why didn't I talk about, this was important, that was important. But, I think that we covered a lot of...
Invitation's still open. You can still come back on. And
don't think that I won't. I'm OCD that way. If there's something I feel like I forgot, I'll totally be back. But yeah, no, I think that, I think I answered your questions probably far more than you were hoping for.
No, you did great. You did great. Well, thank you, everyone. And until next time, stay safe.
The Seoul Podcast is produced by Joe McPherson and is copyrighted 2020 by Zen Kimchi International under the Creative Commons license. Parts of this podcast may be used for non-commercial purposes if you remember to give us credit. You can contact us at sejong@soulpodcast.com. That's SEJONG@soulpodcast.com. For a transcript of this episode, listen to it again and write down what you hear. Please support us at patreon.com/soulpodcast.